When I was leaving the house today to come here, my wife Susan, as she sometimes does, said to me, "So what's the sermon about?" And I stopped at the door and I said, I think today I'm not preaching as Mark Stringer. I'm preaching as the Reverend Mark Stringer. And I think that's one of the things I'm going to miss when I step away from the opportunity to be your minister in a few months, is the calling of this work to live to a higher purpose. So may my words today call forth in you your own reverend, your own reverent self, for that is my wish, both for me and for you. What does it mean to be a community of prophecy? Has been our theme this month in our Soul Matters groups and in our services, and I, for one, have been grateful for this timely question and for the implication that we should want to be a community of prophecy, that in fact our striving to be a community of prophecy is what makes this a religious community worthy of our minds and our hearts. We've been reminded this month that prophecy, for the sake of this theme anyway, is not about predicting the future as if we even could. Rather, prophecy, as we have been considering it, is about seeing what needs to be seen, even when that seeing is painful. Naming what needs to be named, even when that naming is uncomfortable. And being encouraged to act upon what needs action, even when that needed action takes us beyond what we would normally do and who we might normally be. This seeing, naming, and acting are prophetic to the degree that they are expressions of liberation from all that holds us back from being aligned with our deepest moral values and commitments. To be a prophetic community, then, we are called to keep ourselves grounded in the values that are most integral to our community and the ways in which our community might best live those values in the world. To be prophetic, we are not only to give voice to the troubles and dangers of the world as we understand them, we must also hold ourselves accountable to the ways in which we are not living in alignment with our values. Being prophetic, then, is not just calling out those people. It's holding ourselves accountable too. Being prophetic is not just pointing the finger or standing on the soapbox or writing the righteous letter or email or Facebook post. Being prophetic is being willing to see our own actions and inactions clearly. It's about admitting where we may be wrong or misguided or out of step with our ethical commitments. Being prophetic is not just about transforming others, it's about transforming ourselves. Oh, man. Man. Described that way, being a prophetic community went from being cool and self-possessed and assured of our own righteousness to having to be self-reflective and uncertain and humble. Blah. What a drag. Sounds like to be a prophetic community, we have to aim to see and name and undo the ways in which we are falling short. Why would anyone ever sign up for that? It's so much more invigorating to call out others than to call out ourselves, right? But in our prophetic seeing and naming and acting in response to those people, we are hoping, expecting, demanding that they will be self-reflective and uncertain and humble. God, please humble. Right? We are wanting them to see the light and to understand and to change. Never mind, those people want the same thing from us. But we say the changes they want from us are wrong, and so are they. Period. End of story. Except when the only story we know is that we are right and others are wrong, there isn't really much of a story. Not really. Not a redemptive story. I mean, there are things that happen, intoxicating things even. There's self-righteousness. There's cherry-picking of facts. There is, as Jesus said, worrying about the specks in our brother's eyes while paying no attention to the logs in our own. And there is perpetual battle forever and ever, world without end. Amen. That's not the story that I think a community of prophecy yearns to live. Not really. Now, I'm not suggesting that a community of prophecy will accept anything for the sake of a milquetoast piece. No, I'm not suggesting that. A community of prophecy isn't worth much if it isn't courageously and persistently seeking to align itself with facts and truth and the redemptive possibilities and promises at the core of its values and highest priorities. A community of prophecy will not accept just anything. No. But a community of prophecy will hold itself accountable to acting in ways that are aligned with its values, in ways we don't only proclaim our commitments, but that will also help bring about the world that we seek. A community of prophecy will not merely choose to be right, not if it wants to be persuasive. It will also choose to radiate what it most wants to see in the world. It will choose love. More about that in a moment. So here we are this morning in a UU church, a church where the rap on us is that we don't have to believe anything here. Thinking together about being a community of prophecy, a church where we are called to act collectively in alignment with our values. How exactly does that work? Perhaps the best place to begin thinking about the values that we do share is our UU principles. These 7 statements were drawn up by committee and approved more than 30 years ago in the middle of a Reagan presidency, a time when, not unlike today it seems, a vocal and electoral majority of the country was declaring that progressive values were passé, ridiculous, and doomed. These 7 principles were summaries of the values we hope to live, and a flag in the ground declaring where we stand as a religious people, even in our creedless approach to faith. As my colleague Tom Shade has reflected, the principles we named then can seem pious and wishful thinking, platitudes that a Rotary Club could adopt without controversy. As bold statements of our unique identity for many UUs, he says, the 7 principles can be a little disappointing. But, he continues, time and history changes the meaning of words and statements. Those 7 principles are not bland generalities anymore. Today, every one of those principles can be highly controversial. They are actively contested in the public square, and they summarize the aspirations of millions of people who have never even heard of Unitarian Universalism. Is not the affirmation of the inherent worth and dignity pressed upon us by the reminder that Black lives matter? Are not the fast food and minimum wage workers asserting justice, equity, and compassion in human relations as they seek a living wage? Isn't the acceptance of each other and the encouragement to spiritual growth what the effort to name and calm Islamophobia is about? Aren't climate change denial and creationism attempts to refute the free and responsible search for truth and meaning? More than 50 years after Selma, aren't limitations on voting rights still infringements on the democratic process in society at large? How can we square America's policies of constant war, or our increasingly militarized police departments and actions, or the racially imbalanced workings of our criminal justice system, with our commitment to a world of peace, liberty, and justice? Isn't respect for the interdependent web being jeopardized when thousands have to stand in the freezing North Dakota cold for weeks to forestall a pipeline of climate-destroying oil being laid under a primary water source and through sacred ground of native peoples. Our principles are no longer just an expression of our unique identity as a religion. They are now being proclaimed by people from all walks of life as they seek to be prophetic themselves, as they seek to see, to name, and to act in response to the injustices of our time. Now, much as ever, the principles are a kind of prophetic roadmap for us and for others, reminding us not only of where we stand, but where we can be headed together with people of any faith or no faith who share our values and commitments. But here's the thing. There is nothing in our principles about disparaging political parties or personalities or silencing other points of view. There is nothing in the principles that expects a purity of thought that supersedes the principles themselves. Can good people disagree on the challenges of our time for good reasons? Of course. And can they disagree for not so good reasons too? Sure. But let us be wary of declarations made before sufficient evidence and attempts to understand another's point of view have been surfaced. Let us be careful to not betray our own principles, particularly our covenant, to affirm and promote the free and responsible search for truth and meaning in our anxiousness to do and to be right. Let's focus on the positions and the actions and the realities of the members of our one human family, rather than our assumptions about what's underneath these positions and actions and realities. A member recently shared with me a conversation she had with her child following a service here. Her son wondered aloud with a kind of half smile, "Do they check at the door here to see if everyone doesn't like Trump?" How do they know there aren't people in church who like Trump? In an admirable act of swift, in-the-moment parenting, my friend asked her son what he thought about that. Good technique, Mom. He said that he thought the dislike of Trump was an assumption, and maybe there were people who would be offended by it. Well, this prompted his mom to have a conversation with him about the values of Unitarian Universalism, but she admitted it was challenging to explain the statement, "We need not think alike to love alike," in that context. I'll confess, in my role as your minister, I get stuck in this conundrum now and then, this sticky place where to name the injustices of our time, it seems inevitable that some people may end up offended, where in my haste to proclaim the truth as I understand it, I don't always adequately consider the truth of others or the impact of my words. It's a tough and complicated and human place to be, and all but the most self-righteous of us know it well, don't we? Still, I'd prefer that my words and actions be agitational rather than offensive. I'd prefer that the articulations of my truth be invitational rather than insulting. And while I've learned to be okay with my human and therefore inherently imperfect attempts to be prophetic, leaving people unsettled, I'm not okay with leaving people unseen or unacknowledged or unsafe. And so I must offer you an apology. After further reflection, I've come to see that using the Elisa Chavez poem Revenge in last week's service crossed a line that I probably shouldn't have crossed. Now, not because the poem included the F word, which was fun. I mean, Zenda Lindell did it for years. Why can't I? Anyway, not because the poem had the F word, but because it was, as one member wrote me, an expression of verbal violence. Which is something I was kind of wrangling with when the email came in. So I was glad for the confirmation that there was someone else in this world thinking the way that I was thinking. He said if he thought the poem had been satirical in tone, he might have given it a pass, but he took it literally, finding it to be the exact type of behavior that I fully expect from the partisan politics of right-wing talk radio, and not in keeping with our UU values. In my response to him to tell him that I agreed, I wrote, "While I do consider the poem to be somewhat satirical in tone, in that I do not assume that Ms. Chavez actually expects or desires to start a race war or to convert your daughters to lesbianism," as if she even could. And I found her use of words to be a way to return the verbal violence that oppressed communities have been facing from our incoming president and some of the more bigoted of his followers, hence her title, Revenge. I've come to see that the poem is ultimately not helpful, especially in a religious setting, even if it may be cathartic for some, including me. So what is helpful? What is helpful? I've been talking with you for more than 15 years now about my theology of creative interchange, my theology that the closest thing I can find to a God worthy of my devotion is brought to life through the divine event that occurs in encounters where participants engage with the expectation that they could be transformed by the encounter. And by transformed, I mean the growth of their appreciative understanding of themselves and others. That's what I mean by transformation. Now, I've been drawn to the promise of this kind of God as a source of human good through my own firsthand experience of it, and through my sense that these holy encounters are perhaps the only reliable way we will ever grow our appreciative understandings of the unique life experiences of our neighbors in ways that won't betray our common humanity or impose through violence, whether verbal or otherwise, our limited predispositions on others. At the core of this creative interchange is the necessity of three primary values and actions: curiosity, humility, and empathy. Without all three being present, I don't think creative interchange or God is possible. So when I ask myself what it means to be a community of prophecy in our Unitarian Universalist context, I answer with the need to promote and hold ourselves accountable to the UU principles, yes, but also to live in such a way that creative interchange can be possible at any time with anyone else ready and willing to have it. I answer with the need to engage with others with curiosity, with humility, and with empathy. I chose that Charles Eisenstein reading for us today that Barb read because I appreciate its encouragement to not just call out the injustices of our time, but to also see and engage the hearts of those who, along with us, are suffering the wounds of separation, living as we do in a civilization that has robbed nearly all of us of deep community, intimate connection with nature, unconditional love, and so much more. He doesn't ask us to shy away from the challenges of our time. Rather, he asks us to speak hard truths, but with love. He asks us to engage the beauty and potential of our common lives rather than to further separate ourselves into categories of honorable and deplorable. He asks us to focus more on bringing to life our values through our meaningful connections, rather than heavy-handed declarations. He asks us to be animated by empathy, by the question, what is it like to be you? What is it like to be you? Less than a week following the day to honor the life and legacy of Martin Luther King, I'm reminded of King's example of speaking hard truths with love. King preached that the true goal on the road to the beloved community of liberation and justice is not the defeat or the humiliation of an opponent, but a sincere invitation to a change of heart. He said he sought to defeat unjust systems, not the individuals caught in those systems, and believed that the best way to invite change was to lead by example, to model nonviolent compassion. King made this invitation not only in his public appearances and in his published articles, but in his personal correspondence with those who disagreed with him. Just one example. He once received a letter which read, "Negroes should never be equal to the whites, even the worst of them. That's God's decision, not the white man's." King responded with his own letter, "I must confess I am in total disagreement with your position. I feel that segregation is totally unchristian and that it is against everything the Christian religion stands for. This, however, does not at all cause me to hate those who believe in segregation. I feel that we should seek to persuade the perpetrators of segregation through love, patience, and understanding goodwill that it is wrong." His emphasis on not hating those with whom he disagreed was foundational to his philosophy of nonviolence. He argued civilization and violence are antithetical concepts. Through violence, he said, you may murder a murderer, but you can't murder murder. Through violence, you may murder a liar, but you can't establish truth. Through violence, you may murder a hater, but you can't murder hate. Darkness cannot put out darkness. Only light can do that. I think about what it means to be a community of prophecy in light of King's words and examples, as well as our UU principles and my own commitment to pursuing creative interchange wherever possible. And I know that at the core of it all is the necessity to model and encourage the values of curiosity, humility, and empathy. President Obama summed up the necessity of these values well in his farewell address when he said, "We all have to start with the premise that each of our fellow citizens loves this country just as much as we do, that they value hard work and family just like we do, that their children are just as curious and hopeful and worthy of love as our own." When we start with curiosity, humility, and empathy, I believe we will be on our way to being the prophetic church I believe we are called to be. Guided by our principles, we will be willing to speak hard truths, but with love, engaging those around us, animated by the question, what is it like to be you? And we will realize that modeling and encouraging curiosity, humility, and empathy will, in fact, be the best ways to bring about the world we most want to inhabit. The world where we finally see that we are all in this together. We are all in this together. One earth, one tribe, one people. Only then can we be truly liberated. Only then can we be truly free. Amen.